Broke in Canada? No way. We're richer than ever. But tell it to young people who don't have rich parents living on their own paying rent. 1,800 for a basement apartment? Yes, that's what I'm asking for my basement apartment. That just went vacant. Welcome to the Truth About Real Estate Investing show for Canadians. We're a little podcast that started in 2016 with well over 300 episodes. We're probably approaching 350 by now, each an hour long. And these days we have an unpopular opinion depending on where you stand on the future for real estate investing in Canada. Friend of the show, Scott Dillingham, owner of Lend City, who can broker as in he can accept referrals from other mortgage professionals who want to help their clients obtaining U.S. mortgages with U.S. lenders beyond the Canadian banks. Appreciate that Canadian banks still use your local credit, which most of us real estate investors don't want to because we're all tapped out. Anyways, Scott's been onboarding and signing a numerous number of mortgage professionals, agents, and brokers. So anyways, I spoke to some of them just last week, and one of them said, again, these are veterans. To quote Bill, he said, "I see no business case to invest in a Canadian investment property unless the parent is buying a student home for their kids to go to college or university for 10 years." End quote. What I love about mortgage professionals is they know numbers, hence they're fans of, Bill and Dory and I are on a call because they want to learn more about U.S. income properties because they've seen the numbers that we offer, that our clients are doing at Share over the Canadian deals that they're used to looking for. And just a quick side note, I've yet to have anyone debate me that I'm wrong. Anyways, so yes, I agree. There is good business to be done in flipping, on repositioning properties, wholesaling, developing, which are all much more active businesses or investments. So it's hardly passive. So again, I agree with all those things. There's tons of that to be done. I have lots of past guests of the show who are making hay on those types of businesses. If you don't believe me, just look at half of my past guests. Anyways, but again, I've yet to have anyone disagree with me that U.S. long-term rentals are better than Canadian ones. Pretty much. Again, if you poll Canadian investors these days, there's almost no one buying something that has long-term rental attached to it. For that reason, I have a bad feeling for investor-focused real estate realtors and mortgage professionals going forward. My advice to my clients, for many reasons, other than just the state of the Canadian market, is to diversify to the U.S., hold, maybe even sell some of their Canadian properties if they're unable to hold them or if they no longer serve them. I could be wrong. Admittedly, I could always be wrong, but I've been generally right on these long-term trends based on the information we have right now. For example, my colleague Tim Hong, who's on my team, a member of Rockstar Real Estate like myself, he posted a reel on his Instagram showing the difference between a tenanted 3-bedroom properties that are vacant or owner occupied. Again, these are 3-bedroom properties in Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge. He was showing stats comparing tenanted properties versus vacant or owner occupied properties. The tenanted properties were selling for an average of $60,000 less than non-tenanted properties, and they took 65% longer to sell. That's 38 days on market versus 23. And this is just what happens to sell. Now, these aren't perfect comparisons, but that gives you an idea on what the market thinks about tenanted properties. So I posted screen capture and a link in the show notes, so you can grab it there, or you can follow my colleague. I recommend that you do follow Tim Hong on Instagram because honestly, he's hilarious and he tells it like it is, which is why we get along so well. The current market is telling us that they value rental properties less than regular properties. We are even seeing the same for vacant legal duplexes in Hamilton. My investment thesis was the house with the basement apartment, aka in the West they call it a mortgage helper. I always thought it would be the most desirable property, as it would be more affordable than a regular single dwelling home. Live in one unit, rent out the other. But based on the market that we're in today, the market does not want to be a landlord of long-term rentals. And then in general, a lot of these markets are are quite against Airbnb, short-term rentals in general. So that may be the case, may change once we have rate cuts and the market goes back to being nuts. But the current math is the current math. Income properties in the USA have better numbers with less tenant risks, no rent control, no landlord-tenant board. To me, the more Canadian investors get educated on how easy it is to invest in the USA, the better for them. So they can avoid, honestly, the troubles I've been through. I've had three basements flood. I've had 4 visits personally where I've had to go visit to the landlord-tenant tribunal for tenant issues, for non-payment of rent, for tenant vandalism. And if you've never been to the LTV before, that's a short term for it. It's easily one of the most depressing places to be. So again, I can't wait. I'm having so much fun in my work. I cannot wait to lead the journey for many. Speaking of, we are back on September 17th with an all new free training, a 101 of real estate investing style to now incorporate the best practices of both local real estate investing and the USA. I'll go into more detail about the property I just bought in San Antonio, Texas. So on Realtor.com, they actually list my property as having 2,200 square feet. I paid $265 for the house. For all you condo investors out there, you all know per square foot costs. So the math says I bought my house at $120 US per square foot. How's that compared to condos, which are $1,300 to $1,800 a square foot? Oh, and also my rent is $2,300 per month. I'll share my latest economic research, including which market we recently took off our list to invest in, which will again be an unpopular opinion. But we at Share, we have no geography bias because we basically service the entire country. So if you can service the whole country, why not just cherry pick the best markets with only market leaders in their industries making historic levels of investment? To me, it's a very pragmatic decision. A broken Canada, no way. We're wealthier than before the pandemic, end quote. Some brighter news, as per the headline, that is the headline of a recent Toronto Star article. House owners and those with stock portfolios are generally better off now than they were before the pandemic in terms of net worth. I have no argument there. The vast majority of my clients and I have benefited greatly by holding properties since before the pandemic started. Where I disagree, though, is that in every conversation I have with someone in the real estate community or anyone younger than me with limited assets, they all complain about the lack of affordability. For anyone who's a parent, they all are concerned for their kids due to the lack of affordability. A lot of folks know they can make more money in the States, or they have friends who are already leaving Canada or have already left because they can go make more money in the States. And there's many places in the world they can pay less tax. Maybe not many, but generally the conversation centers around the USA or Dubai. For lifestyle, I'm hearing more and more Canadians are going to Mexico, Costa Rica, or even Southern Europe. The grass may be greener on the other side, but the truth is we all know talented people who are investing outside Canada, for sure. My phone won't stop ringing on folks interested in investing outside of Canada. There are some folks who are preparing to leave, some have already left. I was just chatting with friends who had moved to Florida. And the question comes back to, am I leaving? Right now, just my capital is leaving. Based on the world today, the way things are in Canada today, I don't expect my kids to stay in Canada after university for the same reasons I mentioned before. And the other thing is, I've spoken to a lot of parents who have kids in high school, and they all tell me that the good programs here in Canada at our wonderful universities, they're really hard to get into, like 90s, 95s, high 90s to get in. Honestly, I don't know if my kids have that in them. And also, our local kids are having to compete with international students because a lot of spots are saved for international students. So the writing's on the wall. I'm at least mentally preparing myself that my kids will have to be international students themselves, as in they won't go to school in Canada for college or university, sadly. Speaking of education, we have a college instructor on this week's show. Brian Gordon is an old friend of mine from years ago. I believe we met both. I think we first met each other at Rain. He works full time for the largest appraisal company in Canada, if not North America, in a management position. Uh, I've linked his LinkedIn in the show notes if you want to know who it is. We're not naming it because we're not here to promote his employer. Anyways, prior to that, he worked as a Senior Property Tax Analyst for one of Canada's largest REITs, if not the biggest. Working for the REIT that is owned by one of Canada's biggest billionaires. Again, you can get the details on Brian's LinkedIn. Brian has been methodically growing his own real estate portfolio over a 7-year period, consisting of a collection of duplexes, an AirBNB in Blue Mountain, and more recently an 11-plex development in Brantford, Ontario, where he's adding 2 additional units. So super cool. Adding value, that's typically a good way to go. As mentioned, Brian is a course creator and instructor of, it's called Real Estate Investment Strategies at George Brown College, a comprehensive yet affordable course, which is one of the big reasons why I wanted to have him on the show. Real estate investing is largely about return on investment, and that includes the dollars one invests in one's education. The course that Brian teaches, it's only $392.24. And I'm pretty sure there's government stuff out there that will help you make this even cheaper. It's a 20-hour course, and it includes some private one-on-one consultation time with Brian that Brian will detail in the show. What an absolute steal. I've got a link in the show notes for this course. Again, it's Real Estate Investment Strategies online. And if you add George Brown when you're Googling, you'll find it. That's how I found it. Needless to say, I thoroughly enjoyed recording this episode. It's always a pleasure to speak to folks who are very, very well versed in real estate investing. Again, he's been in full time. His day job is working in analyzing properties for over 10 years. So you better believe Brian knows what the deal looks like, and we need more of those folks in this community. So anyways, we're going to learn Brian's tips and tricks so we may all learn for ourselves so we may improve our own businesses. Brian recently returned from Mount Everest, I think that's right. And he did Kilimanjaro recently as well. So he's here to share these absolutely extreme experiences, and again, talk about my favorite subject, real estate investing. And of course, you'll want to hear about Brian's next investments, what his views are on the Canadian opportunities. Please enjoy the show. Hi, Brian. What's keeping you busy these days?
What's keeping me busy? I'd say probably my garden suite that I'm working on right now. First time ever doing a garden suite. I think it's the city of Toronto introduced it. What was it, last year? Changing zoning, so I'm working on converting a detached garage into a 1-bedroom garden suite. So very excited about that project. It's my first garden suite ever. So a lot of learnings with that, but very excited about that project.
Tell us some more. Is it going to be 2 unit, 1 unit? How are you financing it?
Yeah, great question. So it's going to be 1 unit. It's about 400 square feet. So what makes the numbers work with this particular project is because I know a couple other investors that are building garden suites and have built garden suite, but on average, you're spending about $350,000 for a garden suite, give or take. I know people.
Sorry, you're tearing down the garage?
So no. So what makes my numbers work and what makes it make sense is that I'm going to use my existing detached garage and convert that into the 1-bedroom. So my all-in cost is going to be approximately $160,000, and that's hard and soft costs. So renovations, the hard cost is going to be about $130,000, and then soft costs, and then I'm going to add, I'm building a shed. But anyways, there's some other ancillary things that I hadn't expected. Or I didn't budget for, but roughly it's going to be about $160,000, right? And this particular property, it's a triplex in Toronto, the Yonge and Finch
existing
area.
triplex, then the garage will be a 4th unit.
Exactly.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, the garage is going to be a 4th unit, that's right. And so it's a great location. I should be able to get rents upwards of $2,400 plus utilities. And I had one of my property managers come out to take a look at the property. And give me their perspective on rents and so on. So he said anywhere from $2,200 to $2,400 easy. And so it makes sense. So if I'm all in at $160,000 and, you know, my financing is at, say, 6% interest only, it makes sense. And, you know, as we all know, interest rates have started to come down. There's been two interest rate decreases in the past month or two.
Yeah.
So
and two more expected this year.
Yeah, exactly. At least two more expected this year. So it makes sense. What I don't think makes sense is building a garden suite and spending $350,000 to $500,000 and getting $2,700 for rents.
Right.
But
a lot of people are promoting it these days.
A lot of people are promoting this year, and I have friends that have done it. And what I like with what I'm doing is, and this was an idea from our property manager, is I think this property, the specific property, will help with that missing middle. You're not going to be able to put a family in there, but you'll be able to put a couple for, you know, one or two people, and it's going to be relatively affordable versus, you know, spending $3,700 for a 2 or 3 bedroom garden suite, right? So I could have built a 2 or 3 bedroom garden suite, 800 square feet, but that would have cost me probably upwards of $350,000 to $400,000, right? So I opted to just stick with the shell, spend $160,000. That increases affordability for many people, and it just makes more sense. So it's a lot more affordable, and it'll attract a lot more people. And that was kind of my rationale for sticking with the existing detached garage and not tearing it down and starting from scratch.
Any feedback from the existing tenants? And let's start with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, great question. So that's been a challenge, dealing with tenants. So anyone that has invested before and has done renovations where there's existing tenants, there's always going to be issues. And I've done that with my first projects about 7 years ago, and I promised myself I would never do it again. I had no choice because it's a triplex, so I'm not going to get rid of all the tenants, myself included. So there are challenges. So one of the things that happened is when I was getting the trench dug to put in the piping, the contractor ran over one of my tenant's bikes. So warped the bike, and so my tenant showed me. He was good about it. He's like, you know, I wasn't going to make it a big deal, but you know, it's going to cost quite a bit. So I told him, don't worry about it. Just invoice me, go get it fixed, invoice me, and I'll pay for it. You know, when the trench was getting dug, the contractor blocked in my tenant because my tenant didn't move his car yet. And so my tenant's car was there and he couldn't use it and he had to go out. So I said, you know, I'm a very reasonable landlord and I believe in treating people fairly. So I told my tenant, look, if you need to go out, take an Uber, give me the invoice and I'll pay for it, right? Because you want to keep good tenant relations, right? So I've had challenges with that, and you know, my projects already should have been done technically this week, but I'm only at the point where I'll probably be calling for inspections early next week. So I'm probably halfway there. So I'm way behind schedule. But again, that being said, when a contractor tells me a project's going to be done in a month, I budget for 2 months. So although I'm behind schedule based on what he projected, in my mind, I'm more or less on track. I'm a little behind, but I'm still more or less on track.
And neighbors been okay with this? Because you have right to do this.
Absolutely.
By right, you can do this.
Yeah, by right, you can do this in the city of Toronto, which is awesome. And my neighbors actually have been awesome. So my neighbor to my right, there's a 6-plex on the right side of where I live, and he's very, very nice guy. And you know, my contractor damaged a fence, right? So he was very good about it. He didn't even mention it. I told him I'll fix it. And actually, I got to know him a lot better, which is nice. But yeah, there's been no issues with
fantastic
with tenants. Yeah,
that's positive.
Sorry, with not tenants, my neighbors, which has been good.
I don't know if we mentioned, for listeners' benefit, you live in the triplex.
Yeah, so I live in the top unit. So when I purchased a triplex 2 years ago, 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, the top floor was vacant. So I renovated it, gutted it almost to the studs, and refinished the entire unit.
Oh, wow.
So it's a 1,200 square foot unit. It was a 2-bedroom unit. I then converted it into a 2+1. Beautiful unit. My contractor did a fantastic job. And so I live in the top unit, and the main and the basement unit are currently rented.
I mean, because the city of Toronto, that's why you can get these kind of rents. You're probably not far from the subway.
No, so I'm probably a 10-minute walk to Finch Station.
Oh, amazing.
And then probably about 11-minute walk to North York Center.
Right.
So that's why I can get these great rents, because you know, an older 2-bedroom apartment is renting for about $2,600, whereas I just rented my basement, a 2-bedroom basement, about 800 square feet, for 24 plus utilities, right? So those rents are pretty good.
Amazing. Yeah, because your walk score is probably like 99.
Exactly. Right. Walking score to everything, shops, like you said, transit, entertainment.
Very cool. Now we've talked micro. I want to talk to my backup now. Now, what I like about you as a guest is your entire career has essentially been in real estate, including your education. Can you share about that?
Sure. So I went back to school as a mature student probably about 12 years ago. And so I got laid off from my job. I used to work for the Law Society. And I knew I wanted to go back to school. I just didn't know what program I wanted to take. And so I scurried through all the colleges, universities. Real estate has always been a passion of mine since my early 20s. And I wasn't necessarily looking for a real estate program, but I wanted to finally take a program that would interest me. So anyways, long story short, I started looking at a number of programs, and I found this program that was offered through the University of British Columbia and Seneca College. It was a joint program. And I started looking at the courses, and they all resonated with me. So it was like real estate investment analysis, property tax and appraisal, property tax and assessment, law courses, real estate law. And so to me, it was a no-brainer. It was a 2-year program, but because I had gone to university and college before, I was able to accelerate it and do it in 8 months.
Right.
And
which means so less courses.
Yeah, so okay. Exactly, less courses. It was still tough though. I think I was taking 6 to 7 courses a semester.
Okay, versus normal is like 5?
Yeah, versus normal is 5.
Okay, so you're like 20-40% more workload.
Exactly. Okay. So it was intense. Like I didn't see my family for 8 months. It was insane, but it was totally worth the sacrifice. And so with that, graduated with that diploma, certificate from UBC in property tax and assessment. So I am technically a qualified appraiser. I can go and start appraising properties if I wanted to. Right now I work for an appraisal company. I decided not to go that route. As soon as I finished school, I was hired by one of the largest REITs.
Yeah.
So
a big one.
Yeah, a big one. So Choice Property. They used to be called Canadian Real Estate Investment Trust, but they were bought by Choice Properties. So they're the Galen Weston, they own all the Shoppers, Drug Marts, the Loblaws, etc. Right. Throughout Canada. So they're a huge REIT.
Be one of the biggest.
Oh yeah, by far. They're one of the biggest, if not the biggest now since the merger. And so they own office towers, commercial properties, they own industrial, again, right across Canada. So they're coast to coast. So I used to work in the property tax and assessment department. So I'd manage consultants, do the budgets for property tax related. I do forecasting for future developments when they're finished, how much they would pay in property taxes. But what was cool though, what I got excited about is the fact that my vice president was the vice president of developments, and so he was in charge of all the acquisitions and dispositions. So I was sitting with all the guys that were buying properties, that were budgeting for huge developments, $2 billion office properties, commercial properties. So I was in that group, so I got to see it, hear it. And again, I've always loved real estate, always passionate about real estate. So I learned a ton, just by being there and, being around those guys. And so from there, I got recruited to one of the companies that does the assessment in Ontario from actually one of my former professors. She was the vice president there, and I got recruited from her. And then, so I moved over there. And so I've been with...
Sorry, what year was that? When you moved
year
over?
Was 2015.
Okay.
December 2015. You're making me age myself, Erwin.
Well, for the listeners' benefit, we need to justify your reason to be here.
Absolutely.
And why they should listen.
So December 2015, I started at this assessment organization, and I've been there for 8.5 years in management and a senior management position now.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, just for the listeners' benefit, for privacy reasons, we're not naming it, but it's a big one that everybody knows.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not here on their behalf, which is why I'm not going to name it, but yeah, they're the biggest in North America.
Okay.
Right. And so I got...
Wait, it's a national organization, right?
No, provincial.
Provincial?
Yeah,
Okay.
So every province has their own assessment jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And even some provinces, it's broken down by municipality. But again, we're the largest in North America, I believe. Definitely Canada, but I'm pretty certain in North America.
Right. And then what kind of real estate did you assess? All of it? Any?
Yeah. So
farm,
everything.
industrial.
So every single property type in Ontario. So farm, office towers, TD Tower downtown, Sky Dome.
Yeah. So failing marks for anyone who can't guess who this is, but
basically, you can easily Google it. You can easily Google me, right? But yeah, they're huge, and again, so I love real estate, passionate about real estate. This allowed me to be in the real estate industry from a different perspective because I work in stakeholder relations there.
And it's good relations.
And to me, that's when people ask you what's your superpower, it's relationship. Like I'm a relationship person. Naturally, I enjoy people. I'm able to build relationships with people very naturally, easy. Right. And so that's, it's no surprise that my day job, I'm in, I guess, stakeholder relations.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's cool. So yeah, you've seen lots of stuff.
Yeah, I've seen lots of stuff. Like I said, my educational background is in real estate assessment, taxation, and of course, I've been a real estate investor, I'd say seriously, for about 9 years. And yeah, so I have the practical, I guess, and the theory behind what I do.
And your day job, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you're paid lots of money to do this stuff.
Yeah, I get paid decent. Right. Definitely. I have no complaints.
Quick question about the UBC Seneca program. Is it still around?
Yeah, absolutely. It is around. Actually, I met with the coordinator of the program a month ago because I started a scholarship at the program. I started it a couple months ago, actually. It was one of my goals this year in honor of my brother who passed away years ago in a car accident.
I'm sorry.
So thanks. So I started a scholarship on his behalf, and I was just met with the dean for a coffee, who's a lovely person. And we were just catching up. So, because again, the program, like you said, it's still around, very beneficial. It did a ton for me from a career standpoint.
Yeah.
And just, I can't say enough about the program.
Right. Yeah, because before we were recording, we were talking about like private education around this and coaching programs and how, they can range from like 10 to 35,000 I've seen per year, versus like how much do you think how much is the UBC course, for example?
The program you're probably looking at, I don't know, maybe $2,000-3,000 a semester. I'm sure inflation, but still, say you spend $10,000 for the 2 semesters. If you do the accelerated program, which is what I did, you're almost guaranteed a job.
Right.
Basically, they have like a 90% chance that you'll get a job when you're done because there's such huge demand, and it's such a niche industry. So you can either do in-house property tax for a major REIT. You can work for an assessment jurisdiction. You can work as an appraiser. You can work as a consultant for property tax. Like, you have a lot of opportunities, and because the industry is so niche, there's just not a lot of people.
Right. I actually had this conversation with a lot of investors when they tell me about what they're paying for coaching, whatever, and then they want to do a development project and learn on the job. I'm like, why not just get a job? And then not risk your credit and capital and like your home, which is often the security for the development.
Absolutely.
Like, you can go learn on someone else's dime and get paid for it.
Well, that's it. So but you're right though, right? Because it's a win-win. You're learning, you're getting paid for it, and most people, I would argue, and the best way to learn is learn by doing, right? And so you get to learn on someone else's dime. You get paid.
So your
mentorship.
It's all part of the
free
job.
Mentorship.
You don't have to pay for it.
Exactly. So to me, it's a win-win, right? And which is kind of how it worked out with me, fortunately, especially at the REIT.
Right. Yeah. So you have a wealth of knowledge to apply to your own portfolio. So tell us about what do you invest in?
Sure. So
this is your own portfolio.
Yeah. So my own personal portfolio that I built over the past 7 years consists of several triplexes in Pickering and Oshawa specifically. So the typical buy a detached property, add a legal secondary suite. So I have several duplexes in, again, Oshawa, Pickering. I have an AirBNB in Blue Mountain that's worked out really well. I bought that about 7 years ago. In 8 minutes. I paid $250,000 for a 3-bedroom, 4-bath townhome, and 9-minute walk to the village. My son and his friends are there right now.
Sorry, for the listeners' benefit, this is our, I don't really want to say it, but it's like it's Ontario's equivalent to Whistler.
Yes, yeah.
Fair?
Yeah, fair. Not as nice, but
not as nice, not world-class skiing, but
Ontario is really populated, so they get a ton of people up there.
Ton.
It's a huge tourist destination.
Oh yeah,
Humongous.
Huge.
Yeah.
And so with that, prices have more than tripled since I bought it. So I that property, that was more luck than anything else. And so I bought that with some investors. So that worked out really well. I have that triplex that I'm converting now to a fourplex, Yonge and Finch, which I bought 2 years ago. I have a 11-unit building in Brantford where I bought with my partner and I. We currently adding 2 more units. So the property is more or less stabilized now, which is awesome. We bought that just under a year ago. We bought that last year, August, closed on it last year, August. And we're just working on, like I said, we have permits for the 12th unit. We applied for a minor variance for the 13th, but that should go through. And then we'll be able to add 2 more units to that.
Are these additions or within the existing envelope?
Yeah, so one of them is we're converting the washer, the laundry room, thank you, to a unit. And then, so that's in the existing envelope. And so we're relocating the laundry room into the hallway. The hallway is massive. It's a waste of space. So we'll close it off and add the washer and dryers there. And then the other one we're adding on top of the existing envelope of the property. So that'll cost a bit more, but.
Okay. So it's like a top up.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
How much does a top up cost?
So we
don't have many people doing top ups.
We're budgeting about $160,000 for it because it's going to be a small unit. So it shouldn't cost too much, really, because we'll make the building is brick, but we'll just use vinyl for the side. Yeah. We'll put it off to the side, so it won't cost too much.
Okay. How long does that take? And are there many contractors that do this?
Yeah. So we're still in the process of getting quotes because we're still waiting for the minor variance. But we got a quote for the first one. I think we budgeted $70,000 for the first one because we're using the existing envelope. It's like a 400 square feet property around there. And so that's not going to cost a lot. Plumbing is already there. Electrical is already there. It's just about running further plumbing and, of course, your framing, your studs, your drywall, etc.
Your kitchen, bathroom.
Exactly. IKEA style, right? So that's ongoing. My partner George, he takes the majority of lead on that. So shout out to George. And
so George is more like the operations guy.
Yeah, he's the operations guy. So it was interesting. We're both active investors, and I've never been a passive investor in my life. So when we decided to team up to do this project, we were talking back and forth. How do we do this, right? And I reached.
How you divide up the work, yeah.
Right. So I reached out to one of my mentors, to ask him how should we divide it? How should we do it? What are your thoughts? And and he did the exact same thing. So the long story short is, he takes most of the lead. I provide, my expertise in terms of knowledge, resources where needed, but he does a lot of the boots on the ground work, which looking back at it now, I'm glad. I live in Toronto.
Yeah, Brantford's a little far for you.
Far for me, much closer for him. Yeah. And
traffic's horrendous.
Yeah. And it allows me to continue working on my projects. It allows me to continue teaching and do all the great things that I really prefer to do.
Yeah, and do the things you enjoy.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a different tenant profile. Right, and that's one of the things.
What do you mean between Brantford and Toronto,
right?
Or Pickering?
But even just the product type, right? So everyone touts multifamily, and multifamily is great, but with multifamily, unless the property's in Toronto, and even Toronto has sketchy multifamily tenants, but the tenant profile is just very different.
Yeah, for 11 unit in Brantford will be different than a duplex in Oshawa. Very different.
Very different, right? Like Oshawa, you have working class people. Yeah. They're not going to skip out on your rent, assuming you screen properly. I've never had an issue with a tenant in terms of paying rent. Whereas Brantford, again, totally different tenant profile, apartment.
But you're also assuming these tenants, you didn't place them.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's totally different.
Yeah, so we got, I think 3 or 4 units were vacant when we got it. Yeah. And now it's fully stabilized, which is great. We're getting great rents. Right. Things are looking good, but still different tenant profile. Yeah.
An 11 unit in Oshawa would likely have a similar profile to Brantford.
Absolutely.
Versus a duplex, because the rents in the duplex are way higher.
Exactly.
So again, the price point kind of filters out will sort out your demographic.
Yeah, exactly. Price point and your target audience. With a duplex, you're going to get a small family, 1 kid, maybe 2. Again, they're not going to skip out on your rent, in the middle of the night and do and dash, right? You're not going to get that. Generally speaking, I'm generalizing, but you're not going to get that type of tenant profile with a duplex. Whereas a 12 unit in Oshawa or Brantford.
Yeah. Well, some of those tenants have probably been there forever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So
some of like beyond government assistance, and again, I'm generalizing.
Yeah, for sure. You
just
get that.
Talking from my experience.
You get that, and that's why, for me, I decided to stick with, like singles, duplex, triplexes because of the tenant profile.
Yeah, life
and,
is short.
And what I'm looking for in life.
Yeah, like I do the same thing. Like I think everyone should just define who they want as their customer, because they'll be part of your life.
Yeah.
So if certain people you don't want them to be part of your life, then maybe that's not for you.
Agreed.
Like for example, like in an 11-plex in Brantford. So I'll use my own experience. Like if there's an 11-plex in Hamilton, probably half the units the tenants smoke, which is their right.
Yeah.
But I don't like smoke. Yeah. So I don't want to be there. So that's why it's not part of my strategy.
Yeah, and we had that same issue too when we moved in for months. Tenants smoking.
In your triplex?
No, not the triplex. No, in the Brantford.
Got it.
Yeah. Right. So to your point, in my triplex, I have the true definition of like young professionals, just both graduated from UFT master's program, got jobs before they graduated, and working, I think, for Celestica and.
Oh, they're making good money then.
Yeah, both making good money.
Young tech people.
And my other tenant's an engineer.
Yeah,
right. So a totally different tenant profile, right?
Yes.
Which I prefer. I want peace in my life.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I am passionate about real estate, but I'm more passionate about traveling and spending time with family. So
amazing.
That's my focus.
Okay, we need to take the travel, but I still need to get to George Brown.
Sure.
Can I say that?
Yeah. Of course, absolutely.
Yeah. How do you end up teaching college?
Yeah, so great question. Something that I didn't expect I would do too. So one of my best friend, we go out once a month. We'll have dinner. We'll talk about life, like everyone else, business, etc. And I told him that I want to create a program, and a real estate program for new investors. And I'm thinking about maybe not sure how I'll set it up. Would I do a workshop on the weekend like many other investors? But I wanted to teach it at a college. And he was like, yeah, that's a great idea. He's like, well, I'm, I teach at George Brown, and I can connect you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot that you teach there, right? So the next day,
it's a part-time thing for him too.
Or, oh yeah, totally.
Okay,
yeah. He doesn't teach here anymore. He facilitates the he's just one of the coordinators. So he built an HR program there, and so he connected me with the dean of continuing education. And we had a 3-hour conversation back in.
Your first conversation was 3 hours?
What about 2 hours? About a 2-hour conversation. We hit it off.
Still long.
Yeah, we hit it off. Really nice guy. He was totally interested and in what I was gonna offer in terms of the target. And George Brown doesn't have a program like that, and I don't think any college has a program like that. And so he looked me up. He did some research on me. I could tell he went on my LinkedIn profile, and obviously wanted to make sure I was credible, and did some other due diligence. And then he called me back a couple weeks later, and he's like, "Yeah, we'd love to have you teach." So I developed the program, the curriculum, and that took several weeks. And then I started teaching. So the course is geared to new investors, and the reason I did that is selfishly is because I know when I was in my early 20s, internet wasn't as readily available as it was. I had no one to go to. I guess the typical immigrant parents. Yeah. They were trying.
You didn't have a smartphone that used access the internet.
No, not at all. And I didn't have anyone in my circle that I could use as a mentor or leverage. Yeah. And so that's why I wanted to create this program that could be a starting block for new investors.
Right. For like someone like the 20-year-old you.
Yeah, exactly, a 20-year-old me. Yeah. Surprisingly enough, the age range of the program is probably on probably maybe 40, right? Because it is done through the continuing education program. In the evenings. So, which is fine though, because these people are more likely to take action. This age group, they either have a house or they're thinking about buying a house. So
I just hope more young people would take it too. Yeah, like some 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds.
None. I haven't. I think the youngest person in my program so far is probably late 20s.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing this credit isn't credited towards their diploma.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. It isn't credited towards a certificate program or diploma. And nor do I want to build a curriculum that way. Like my focus is just to give them enough tools, and I try to make it as practical as possible.
Yeah.
That's the benefit, right? Not just theory, just practical. So I provide resources, I provide podcasts, like, so one of my slides is, here are some real estate investment groups in Alberta, because I have students in Alberta. I had a student reach out from New Brunswick that's going to take my course. So I find real estate groups saying, hey, because to me, one of the things that you should do as an investor is join a real estate group. Like that propelled me as a new investor. And I think
Durham REI?
Exactly,
Yeah.
Durham
Quentin,
REI.
yeah. And shout out Quentin.
Yeah, shout out Quentin D'Souza. And that helped propel my investment career. And so that's one of the things I promote, right? So I have a slide with, a number of real estate groups in the GTA that I think are credible. I have, podcasts, what are the podcasts that I listen to, right? Again, free education. So yes, you are going to have to pay for certain things, but what are other ways that you can educate yourself? And podcast is a great way. It's free. You can listen to it at your leisure. So again, practical tools I provide to the students, and steps that they can take to start their journey.
Amazing. How long did it take you to put together this course?
Oh, probably about a month and a half.
Right. How many hours do you think that was?
Oh God.
Of effort?
Maybe 50 hours.
Okay.
50 hours.
That's pretty
But
quick,
but the good part is, a lot of the knowledge, I already had a lot of the knowledge.
Uh-huh.
It was just putting it on paper, putting it on a slide deck, presenting it properly, making sure that I'm not using a lot of jargon and I can explain it easily to the students. And then, where I have the gaps, because I'm definitely not an expert in every field, I'll bring in a expert in the industry, right? So if I want to present on short-term rentals or mid-term rentals, I'll bring in a mid-term rental specialist. If I'm really passionate about a project, or I shouldn't say a project, but a strategy that I think is working right now, I'll bring in an expert on that strategy if I'm not the expert. So it's awesome because you get to obviously hear me speak and try to share my knowledge, but then you also have experts in the industry that you wouldn't typically have access to unless you're paying hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars for coaching or workshops, etc. And so it's a huge win for the students.
And where can people find more information on the George Brown course?
Yeah, so if you go to George Brown Continuing Education course, you can find it there. I think it's under the business program, but I would just type up George Brown Real Estate Investment Strategies and it'll come up. So again, just type George Brown Real Estate Investment Strategies and you'll see the course. I typically run it each semester, so the next course starts, I think, September 11th, and then I run it again in the winter, and I think the next course is around February, and then I take the summer off because I like to spend time with family and just relax.
And it's $10,000 to $35,000 to take this course?
It's actually $26,000. No, I'm kidding. So again,
for a limited time only.
For a limited time only.
There's only 8 slots left.
So
Run to the back of the room.
Going back to what I said earlier, I wanted to provide the education to the audience. Again, I thought about myself when I was when I was 20 years ago, and I couldn't afford a course for $10,000 or $15,000 25 years ago, and so I wasn't going to even consider charging that much. I wanted to make sure it was accessible and affordable for the average person. So the course is around $400, and it's 8 courses for roughly 3 hours. I think it's 2.5 hours once a week. So it's a very affordable course. And what I like is that, so a lot of people like you, Erwin, will reach out to me on Instagram and say, hey, can I pick your brain? Can I take you for lunch? And, I'm probably too nice when it comes to that. I will always do it. And so now what I do is, and it's not, and I'm not promoting my course, but what I tell them is take the course, and then I'm happy to have a couple consults with you after, because I know that if you are serious, you'll spend $400. But if you're not serious, you're not going to spend $400. And frankly, I'm just not going to spend time with you, right? Yeah. So that,
especially with like absolute beginner questions.
Exactly.
Should I incorporate or not?
Yeah.
What are the top cities to invest in?
Yeah. That's like the number one rookie question. I always tell people that what should I incorporate now or later? But so it allows me to actually,
step 1, figure out how to make money.
Basically, right?
We're all going to pay taxes.
Yeah. So
right?
it allows me to sift through people that are actually going to take action.
Yeah.
which, you know, so to spend $400, not a lot of money. They can start to learn, and then, like I said, I do provide my time. I tell each student I'll give them 3 hours of free consult to help them along their journey afterwards.
For a $400 course,
yeah,
where they're gonna learn a bunch of stuff to get 3 hours of your time as well.
Yeah, which is insane. I mean, I know myself, I've paid $400 an hour to consult with certain people.
Yeah, well, our lawyers are like,
right. And I'm even saying other real estate investors that I respect. Yeah. I've spent upwards of $400 for an hour of consult. Yeah. Right. So you're getting, I don't know, what is it, 24 hours for $400. Yeah. So, anyways, I think it's a great program, especially for what you're paying, and it's a great way to start. You know, if you're a seasoned investor, this is definitely not for you. But for those people that want to start the process and they don't know where to go, they don't have resources, then this is a great way to start.
I always think it's good for a refresher as well, especially for $400. And you can take this anytime you want. You deliver it live. Looks like
I deliver it live. I deliver it live.
September's delivered live, 6:15 p.m. on Wednesdays, delivered live, and you get the recording.
Yeah, you get the recording.
Right. How long do you get to keep the recording?
You can keep it as long as you want if you download it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah. Okay.
And you get my slides as well. And you get to meet other people, you get to build relationships with other industry folks, because again, I bring in a lot. So what I've heard from many students is that one of the greatest benefits that they've seen is that the resources that I bring in, right? So again, I bring in experts in the industry, from, you know, whether it's folks in the West, whether it's folks in the East. So you know, if you live in the East or you want to invest in the East, then I'll bring in experts in the East that can, whether it's a real estate agent, whether it's a mortgage specialist, to you know, to help people on their journey. Because as you know, Erwin, if you're gonna become an investor, you want to work with investor-focused everything. Investor-focused agent, investor-focused mortgage broker, investor-focused appraiser, et cetera, et cetera. And so these are the resources that I bring in, that I make available to my students, which otherwise they wouldn't know how to do.
Folks you've already vetted.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I think you and I both know that you can't trust everybody.
Oh, gosh. And that's one of the things I stress on my course, is that just because someone's on Instagram, you know, in front of a plane or in front of a fancy car, means nothing.
Yeah, well, a lot of those people went bankrupt recently.
Yeah, exactly. Sadly. So
sadly.
To your point, you know, I make sure I vet the people, and that, you know, they're aligned with my values, right? It's not all about money. Yeah, we all want to make money. That's fantastic. But like, they actually truly want to help people. Like, that's important to me.
Yeah. Amazing. And before we're recording, we were talking about like return on investment. You know, if your investment for education starts at $400, there's a good chance your return on investment will outperform,
no question,
a lot of things.
Yeah,
right.
No question.
Like I know. I've had people on the show who've taken like $30,000 programs, whatnot. I had someone that took paid $40,000, and it was complete. They said it was a complete sham. So, you know, negative ROI for $40,000. But again, like, you know, this is a small bite.
Yep. Small bite, great way to leverage resources, great way to see if you want to get started. And, you know, one of my first class, I tell my students that, you know, before you even consider becoming a real estate investor, you need to decide what type of real estate investor you want to be. Meaning, are you going to be an active partner? Are you going to be a passive investor? Sorry, active investor or a passive investor? And I met one of my students, I won't say her name, but she was actually at the event I saw you at, that Rockstar event, the last one, actually. Cool. And she's a doctor, and she's like, I don't need the money, obviously, right? But I'm gonna retire soon, and I need some way to keep myself stimulated. And so I told her, and I met her after, and I said, you need to figure out what type of investor you want to be based on where you are. And then we met her for a coffee a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, okay, Brian, I've decided I want to be a passive investor for now until I wind up my practice, and then I'll become active. And I'm like, awesome. You know, now your next step is deciding who you want to partner with, right? So again, everyone thinks they want to become an investor or an active investor, but there's other ways to become an investor, right? Like through channels like Share, which we'll probably talk about later, but there's different ways to still invest in real estate but not be an active investor, as you know, Erwin, right?
I will say, and I think I always like to repeat it, is in my experience, people who get rich are generally the ones who are somewhat active. By definition, they're active, and I'll qualify by that saying they're 100% owners. right? It's I don't know many passive investors who get rich going that way. If they get rich, if they make a lot of money, like $1 million or more, it's typically because they have a lot of money to put in.
Right, exactly. And they don't need the money originally, right? It's just a great way for them to diversify.
And on the flip side, though, the people who are losing their shirts were the active investors as well.
True. So more risk, right? More risk.
But then the stuff that's going on that like neither you or I would ever touch. No. Before we were recording, you were talking about, and I say this all the time, I do one project at a time.
Yeah.
Right? Like my project's not over until tenants in, rent's being paid and collected.
And properties refinanced for me. Like, again, I'm very methodical, and some people will say slow. So you're part of the club that my investment club, I know people are doing we're doing 5 or 6 burrs, flips at the same time. And I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. Yeah. But I've always said I'm going to buy, renovate, place the tenants, like you said, refinance the property. And once my refinance is done, then I'll take a break for a couple weeks, and then I'll look for the next property. So that cycle is usually about 8 months from beginning to end. And so I, for the past 7 or 8 years, I've been buying a property about every 8 months, but it worked for me. I have 2 kids. Yeah. I enjoy full-time job.
Yeah.
I travel,
and a part-time job.
And now I teach as well. So, my time is very precious, like most of ours, and I want to make sure that I'm using my time in the best way, and I don't need to do 2 or 3 deals, simultaneously. I don't need that for my goals. Again, and Erwin, I don't have to tell you, but one of the first things you should do when you become an investor is saying, what are my goals? What are my objectives? What am I trying to achieve? And that was a mistake I made. I just did what everyone else was doing, but you need to decide, like, what are your goals? What are your objectives? And the strategy should then be determined based on what your objectives and goals are, right? Or they should align. And so you really need to determine, like, what are you trying to achieve with your investments? So yeah.
And that's kind of the point of the show as well, is like, if, for example, I'll have stars like yourself, like Quentin D'Souza, like Ryan Carr on the show, and then I extract from them like what their day-to-day looks like, what that period of life has been like for them to build massive portfolios. And now for an investor who's listening to this, like, I want to be like Ryan Carr. Like, okay, understand Ryan Carr is like a 7 to 7 guy, 7 days a week, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's how he works. Like, I don't want to do that, but I want the same results. Like,
can't have it both ways.
I don't know how you get there, is my point. And that's kind of the point of the show when I have people like that on, right?
Yeah,
like, and then like for me, I know I'm not that, so I stay in my own lane.
Agreed.
Right? And again, that's the kind of the point of the show. Like, this is how they got there, and now decide for yourself where you fit into that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I remember when I was traveling with Quentin last month, he said to me, he's like, there's times that I'm very stressed. Like, there's a lot of stress that comes with having a portfolio, and it really made me think to exactly what you were saying. Like, it's great to be extremely successful, but understand that there's downsides, right? Stress, you have to be available, so it's, in many cases you can't have it both ways. Like, you have to put the work in, you have to put the time in if you want to amass a massive portfolio.
Yeah. And like, we are in real estate winter right now. I was just talking to someone you know as well, who's apartment buildings to sell, and I don't even think they're getting showings. And she's a great investor, and your buildings aren't even getting showings.
Yeah.
Right.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. So it's, whereas fast forward or go back 2 years ago, and
people were buying sight unseen.
Buildings were going like hotcakes. It's
Plex. I'll write the offer right now.
Yeah, no, totally. I remember I was flyering, looking for apartment buildings. It was a totally different environment.
Totally crazy.
Yeah. But
and everyone was celebrating, everyone was making money, but so many people have gone quiet on social media right now, for example.
Yeah. Right? Well, it's telling, and again, I tell my students.
Yeah, the Warren Buffett quote.
Right. Yeah. Like, what does it go again? When the tide goes out, you know who's swimming naked, and this is what you're seeing. So I expect to see a lot of investors disappear, a lot. I expect to see only a few investors really left over the next couple of years, which is why I still think there's still a ton of opportunities depending on the strategy. But a lot of people have already disappeared, right? You've seen the news headlines like I have. We're in the investment circle. I hear things, people that I know that have done extremely well. They tell me about other people that have reached out to them, and
see if they're buying.
Yeah.
I have this to sell. Are you buying?
Exactly. So, although, again, what people.
Yeah, we went from flyering to find building leads to sellers of owners of apartment buildings calling you to see if you're buying.
You're 100% right. Like, people reached out to me and said, "Hey, this person's selling their buildings. They're offloading all their buildings." And I'm like, really? But it's just a different time, and you have to understand that. And some of the best advice I've gotten from one of my previous mentors was that you have to have staying power. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Right? And what he said is, older guy, I think he's probably 60, and so he's been through the ups and downs of the real estate cycle, and he's like, there are going to be bad times, and you need to be liquid enough to get through those bad times. And COVID taught me, if COVID taught me anything, was that, from a financial standpoint, was that when COVID hit, I wasn't liquid. April rolled around, and like many investors, I was very concerned because we thought, Doug Ford was telling people not to pay rent. Politicians were saying not to pay rent.
I love that.
And so I was worried, right? That
who wasn't?
Exactly. Every investor was worried.
Everyone was shitting their pants.
So I'm running all these models, saying, okay, what do I look like? And I had access to line of credits and so on, right? I had access to a ton of line of credits, but I did not have a lot of cash.
Right.
Give God thanks. All my tenants continued to pay, but it taught me a lesson without going through the lesson, was that I was not comfortable relying just on my HELOCs to get me through bad times. So I started raising capital, right? Enough capital, right, to get me through the bad times, which is actually the only reason why I was really able to buy that apartment building that I bought last year, because I had capital for an emergency fund. So, a lot of people have come to the situation where we're all dealing with rough times now because of interest rates, but a lot of people are over leveraged. They have no capital available, and
no liquidity.
They have no liquidity, right?
No credit, no
liquidity, and
sorry, I'll clarify credit. Like, they're credible. It's just lenders ain't lending.
Lenders aren't lending. They have to exit deals, like we were talking about with private money. I raised private money for this this building that we bought. Fantastic deal. We did a VTB, and then a good friend of mine lent us the rest privately. But I made sure that I had like a 3-year VTB, right? Because I knew this wasn't going to pass anytime soon. And so far it's working out extremely well. But I told people, if you're going to do a VTB now or private funds, you better have it for at least 2 to 3 years at a minimum. And this was about a year ago.
Get through real estate winter.
Get through real estate winter. But yeah, so it's tough times. I don't wish ill on anyone. I hope everyone's able to make it through this, this downturn. But that's not going to be the situation.
No, it's going to be pretty bad.
Yeah.
This is going to be the worst correction I've seen. Because, I saw some people go belly about back in 08, 07, 08. But the community is way larger now.
Yeah.
And and the leverage that people took on was way higher than back then.
Yeah, I think by far.
Yeah, by far. Yeah.
So we are going to see way more carnage here.
Yeah. Because a lot of it is hard money loans in this current time versus back then. It was people with there's largely equity deals back then.
Yeah, I know.
But the cash flow just well, the credit ran up, credit problems, cash flow problems, and that put people under. But like this current generation, they never learn from those mistakes because they're brand new.
Yeah, and they never, like I said, experience is one thing when you teach theory or you listen to theory, but you really learn through taking action and actual practical experience. And a lot of these folks have never been through a downturn.
Yeah.
Right, so they don't know how to react.
Yeah, 2008 was a credit crisis, meaning there was no credit.
Yep.
So your portfolio should be stress tested against what if you can't get more credit.
Yeah. And most people don't even understand that, right? So again, I stress tested my portfolio. I don't know, I can't tell you how many times over the past 3 years, right? Whereas, newer investors, new upwards of 5 years, they probably don't even know how to stress test their portfolio properly.
Yeah, because they believe they can just continue to raise money.
right. Or interest rates, not interest rates, or values continue to go up. So it's, it's good times. And, even myself included, I got pretty comfortable in that prices were just going up, right? But, it's unfortunate, but again, I think there's going to be more opportunities because there's going to be a lot less investors in the next
for people who have
6 to 12
capital and
months.
credit.
Exactly. For people who have
Which we've
capital
always
and credit.
known.
Yeah.
You have capital and credit, you will win.
Agreed 100%.
Now you and I have also talked about a bit about the States as well. What are you seeing? I think most people know where our standpoint is.
Yeah, I think most people do.
And like I said before recording, I don't want to drink my own Kool-Aid.
No. But there's a couple reasons I like the States. I think Canada, and I love Canada. I was born and raised in Canada, is on an economic decline, right? Like even if you don't understand money, and I spend a lot of time understanding money supply, the history of money and how money works and so on, right? But even if you don't understand that and you're not really into that, Canada has and had a productivity problem, right? We're just not productive, which is interesting considering that we bring in, and I was thinking about this on the way here, we bring in record numbers of immigrants, and especially way more per capita than the US.
Oh yeah,
right?
it's not
So
even
then
close.
you ask yourself, why is Canada not as productive, right? Because a lot of the productivity, the innovation, the entrepreneurship comes from immigrants, right? At least in the States, and to some degree here too. So why do we
Elon Musk was an immigrant.
Yeah. So why do we have such a productivity problem, right? And we could spend hours talking about that. But the reality is, Canada is on an economic decline. Our productivity is like the lowest, I think, in the G7. And the bright spot of Canada right now is Alberta because of oil, of course.
And they're attracting all the talented people.
And they're
too.
attracting all the talent.
Because they have affordable housing.
Absorbing it from everyone else, and they have affordable housing. Yeah. So where does that leave the rest of Canada? We live in Ontario. You probably know Ontario has the highest sub-sovereign debt in the world, meaning if Ontario was a country, they'd be the most indebted in the world. Most people don't know that. So think about that for a second.
Yeah, and while our services haven't improved. Healthcare and education haven't improved.
So what does that mean, Erwin? It means that governments have to raise taxes.
Which they did.
Which they did, and will continue to raise taxes. It means that it will be tougher for landlords or rental providers going forward.
Yeah. Investors, period.
Investors, period. There's no question, in my opinion. So if you believe those things, which I do, I think it's prudent to look elsewhere. So, and I also realized too, and a friend of mine was telling me this when we were traveling, it's like, he said he owned a number of properties in the States because him and his wife were thinking about moving there, wintering there, but also he never has to change his Canadian currency when he travels to the US. And I'm like, that's a fantastic idea. Yeah. If nothing more,
especially at today's rates.
Especially at today's rates. And
they were like 72 cents right now.
Yeah, especially after the most recent announcement, interest rate announcement yesterday. And so you ask yourself, where are you gonna go, right? We border the country that has the largest economy in the world.
Largest almost everything.
Right. And that has similar property rights, which are important to Canada.
Yeah.
And that's still very productive and still has the world reserve currency. Yeah. Sure, it'll be gone in 20, 30 years, but...
we'll be dead. I'd probably be dead by then. I may be dead by then. No, maybe not. Yeah.
But
I'll be well set up for it.
Exactly. That's my point, right? So I've started doing some research. I started talking to different people. I've had a couple of calls with Share. I started doing my own macro research, no different than what I teach in my course.
We should have lunch and talk about it.
Totally should. So I've narrowed down my search to Atlanta. So that's where I'm going to buy. And I started researching the neighborhoods. The only thing I don't know is am I going to use Share to support the process for the first couple properties and then go on my own, or do I just go on my own and just start buying? So that's where I'm at right now. I want to take a trip to Atlanta either this month or next month. I'm just deciding on life because I may have some life changes soon. So if that does happen, then I'll probably go in the mid-August. If not, I'll go to September and do boots on the ground and just to get a feel. I'm a very visual, tactile person, so I like to see, touch, and feel. And I find taking a couple trips out there, just to get a feel of communities and so on, makes sense. But my focus after completing this garden suite in Toronto will be the U.S. Single family homes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I keep having to, because Canadians are generally marketed courses around much more advanced things, I find, because there's no cash flow in single family homes, condos, single detached, duplexes, really.
Yep.
So almost everyone comes to me like, oh, I want a garden suite, I'll buy an apartment building, like, and they're a complete novice, and they're like, why are you buying a single family home in the States? Like, so like, literally, my house in San Antonio is a 5.1 cap rate.
Wow.
Versus duplexes, from my math, for like Oshawa, Ottawa, Hamilton, roughly about like a 4.1 to 4.3.
Yeah. And think about it, right? If you could buy a single family house in the GTA, you would go nuts and just start buying single family homes, right? The lease tenant issues.
Yeah, lease tenant issues. Yeah.
You're not dealing with multiple tenants.
Yeah. You don't have to split the utilities.
Yeah. You're getting a higher profile tenant.
Your property manager loves you.
It just makes sense. So you can go to the largest economy in the world, in great neighborhoods, beautiful homes.
Oh, they're so nice.
And cash flow or break even on a single family house.
Yeah. Yeah. Why would I complicate it?
I'm a simple guy, Erwin. So to me, it just makes sense from a currency diversification standpoint, a geographic diversification standpoint. And like I said, unfortunately, things are going to get worse in so many different ways in Ontario. Again, whether it's increased taxes, more pro tenant legislation,
anti-landlord, anti-capitalist
sentiment, anti-capitalist sentiment, anti-business sentiment. At some point, people are just going to give up. Yeah. Investors, right? And
a lot already
you've
have.
seen it. Well, yeah, you've seen it. I'm sure you saw the same stats. The same stats I saw, where they said there were record outflows of capital in Canada. Yeah. Record. Yeah.
Right. Bomb Canadians. So Canadians aren't investing locally.
Canadians aren't investing locally. Yeah. And although people will always hate on landlords, but the reality is, there are small landlords like us or rental providers like us that are, that own 1 to 20 units. We're the ones that are responsible for producing like 80% of the housing in Ontario just by adding 1, 2, or 3 suites. So if people like us are leaving, and I can't tell you, Erwin, there's not a real estate meeting or real estate session that goes by where I speak to an investor that either has left or they're thinking about leaving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wait till I talk to them.
Right? Honestly, so not everyone's gonna leave, and don't get me wrong, I still think there's opportunities here from like small development, intensification.
Yeah.
But I think I think if you look long term, the opportunities are gonna dry up in the GTA in the next, 3-4 years.
Yeah, like even just simply, like my cash to close in my house in San Antonio is 67,000 American.
Wow. Right?
Like that's your hard costs on your garden suite are 130,000 Canadian.
I paid. What did I pay? I think I paid like 25,000 in land transfer tax.
Oh my god!
On this triplex I bought 2 years ago, it was insane. Some ridiculous amount.
Yeah, because it's Toronto.
Yeah, because it's Toronto. Yeah. So you're paying double land transfer tax. But I think it's prudent to start looking at other options.
Yeah, my advice to my clients is, you don't have to sell everything, but your next purchase, you have to compare to what we're doing in the States.
Agreed. Right. And I'm not gonna sell. Like, there's a couple properties I have. I don't usually buy new construction at all, but I did buy a new construction in Georgian Bay. I paid $600,000 for a 2,200 square foot end unit townhome on a golf course.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, fantastic deal. It's gone up hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they keep pushing the closing, which is fantastic for me. But I also own a property in Blue Mountain with investors. The property in Georgian Bay, I own 100%. But I'm not going to keep both properties, right? Like, I don't need both properties, so I'll sell one of those and I'll divert that cash to the States. But I will sell 1 or 2 properties and invest there. And right now I'm just in the process of raising capital, and I'll use some of my own to make my first purchase. But I think you have to look outside of Ontario or Canada. I think we're at a point now where it's not a nice to have, I think you almost have to start looking outside.
Well, to me, I think it's a baseline. I think a share property for everyone in that, and obviously I'm biased, but straight up, I make more money selling a local property in commission wise than I do in the States. Not even close. But yeah, so my bias, my professional opinion is a share property should be everyone's baseline and compare everything against that.
Yeah.
Both in terms of cash flow return and effort and capital outlay, right? Like we know many people who are shelling out $300-350 to build garden suites.
Yeah,
right.
$350. I know a friend that built for $350.
Yeah.
I know someone who spent $500,000.
Yeah, and you get no land with that.
Right.
Because we're in real estate because we want hard assets.
Yeah.
I have a large lot in the States. I'm getting my San Antonio property.
But it's a good point though, because if you spend $350,000 on a garden suite, you
that's
could
easily
spend
2 houses in the States.
Yeah. But let's say you were going to be conservative, you wanted to dip your feet in, and you bought it cash, $300,000. Like, I don't know, or like you said, buy 2 properties, split it. I don't know. I just think at this point now, a lot of investors are looking for ways to continue to invest. And until something changes with garden suites, the math doesn't make sense. Because if you spend $350,000, you're better off lending it at 10%, ideally using 2 TFSAs so you don't pay taxes, and then you pay tax on the other because interest income is taxed high. But otherwise, like it doesn't make financial sense, and I'm generalizing, to build a garden suite.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right.
I don't even think it makes sense for a basement suite.
No, because if you spend $80,000 on a basement suite, $90,000.
Oh, that's a cheap one. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have connections, you'll spend $130,000, but I would probably end up spending about $90,000. Right? It's still worth it because $90,000. So you do that in Oshawa, you'll get $1,900 rent. It's still worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I know people, I have a friend of mine. She just finished a basement. She spent $180,000 for a basement and some cosmetic finishes at the top. So at some point it doesn't make sense, but it doesn't make sense because the purchase price is too high. Mm-hmm. So whether it makes sense to spend the money on a basement apartment, you can't buy the house to spend the money on the basement apartment because prices are too high. So it doesn't make sense. The duplex formula is gone. That ship has sailed years ago. It doesn't make sense, which is why people are, pushing garden suites. But garden suites also don't make sense unless, in my opinion, you can use a detached garage to do it.
Yeah, do it within an existing building.
Exactly. Yeah. But otherwise, garden suites don't make sense.
Yeah. So I'll throw in the other pieces. My current observation of the current market is that the market, for example, I believe there's 6 legal duplexes sitting in Hamilton that aren't selling, and they're vacant.
Wow.
So the market is telling me that buyers don't want rental property. Like because my original philosophy with doing basement suiting duplexes was that people would want the mortgage assistance from being able to rent out part of the house. Mm-hmm. But the current market is telling me that's not wanted anymore.
Interesting. Right.
The market is telling me that like being a landlord is like basically a stigma. The market does not want to be a landlord. So that plays into my decision. Why would I invest all that money if buyers don't want it? Now that's a snapshot of this current market. I don't know what's going to happen a year from now, but based on what I know today,
this is where it is.
Right?
And
if the LTV doesn't improve, how does this change?
Well, we know that's not going to improve. And well, you know what? It's funny because my students, I've had a couple students reach out to me, and they don't want to buy in Ontario at all. They're just not interested. Yeah. They won't buy in Ontario, and it's because they don't want to be landlords because they're afraid of.
They don't want exposure to the LTV.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is reasonable. Yeah.
Which is very reasonable.
Yeah.
And so they're looking at other options. Yeah. So even new investors, which, I mean, most new investors, they want to invest close to home. It's familiar. They feel it's easier.
Yeah, it's a lot of money though.
Right? Which is more money. But even new investors now, which is interesting, they don't even want to invest in Ontario. Mm-hmm. So it tells you how bad things are. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? And even from my own experience as being a realtor, is converting rich people to become landlords in Ontario really difficult. Oh yeah. Yeah. Because to them it's not worth it. No, because they're rich. Yeah, they're rich. Right. They value their peace and they don't want the headaches. Yeah. Yeah. So again, that plays into my decision, my own current theory that it doesn't make sense to basement suite or garden suite. Yeah. And as you get older too, right? As I get older, my needs change, right? So I'm not going to do some of the things that I did when I started 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah, this is fluid.
I want
Investing
more
is
peace,
fluid.
right? I want more peace, right? So
yeah,
to
there's
me,
that too. Yeah.
To me, single family homes in great markets make sense.
Yeah, I was in Atlanta just 2 months ago for a networking meeting among 7-figure entrepreneurs, and I met a property manager there who manages 800 units.
Wow.
I'm like, oh, you have a qualified opinion. What are you buying next? Single family homes. Okay. You just more of my own Kool-Aid. But again, qualified opinion, right?
Yeah.
So,
no, agreed.
All right, we have to talk about Everest because you're crazy.
Sure, let's talk about Everest. What do you want to talk about?
What led you to the... People die. Wait, did you see bodies?
No, well, we saw a shrine. So let me backtrack. So
sorry, I'm just getting right into it.
let me backtrack. So why did I do Everest? Let's backtrack. So I climbed Kilimanjaro last year, and the reason I did it was because my mentor at the time, as we were planning out, I think 2023, he wanted me. One of the things he wanted me to do was he wanted me to do something that was going to challenge me physically and mentally and make me uncomfortable.
Yeah, you can go run a 5K.
Right? You could. But so this was December 2022, and I had just come back from a trip with a couple Durham REI members, and I remember Quentin saying that he was going to climb Kilimanjaro. And when he told me, I kind of just did the whole eye roll thing, because I was like, yeah, good for you, right?
Yeah.
And I moved on. And then when I sat with my mentor at the time, I was like, okay, and I went back and I messaged Quentin and I was like, hey, is there room for me, right? Because I was like, that's gonna make me uncomfortable. I've never even camped before. I've never slept in a sleeping bag before. I'm not an outdoors person, nothing. So I knew this would make me uncomfortable.
You're a hardcore city boy.
Yeah, I'm a city boy, right? I mean, sure, I go to a cottage, but I mean, a nice lake. I'm sleeping indoors.
Yeah. Air conditioning.
Yeah.
Yeah, the weather's not gonna kill you outside.
No, not at all. So I knew this was gonna challenge me mentally, physically, push me, make me uncomfortable. And anyway, long story short, I went on that trip to Kilimanjaro.
How hard is that?
Oh, it was very hard. The last night I got very sick. I could barely. We started our trek about 12 o'clock in the morning, and it was a 10-hour trek to get to the peak. So it was minus 20. It was we were wearing 5 layers, bottom and top. I felt amazing. I started walking, and then I kid you not, within 15 minutes of starting, the ascent, 12 o'clock in the morning, I felt sick. I started getting hot flashes. I thought I was gonna pass out. So I needed to sit.
What was this? Altitude sickness? Food poisoning? What was it?
Altitude sickness.
That got you? No.
Yeah, altitude sickness. And long story short, so for the next 15, 20 hours going up and down, I struggled. I could barely walk. I was literally taking 4 steps, pausing for, 2 or 3 minutes. Our Sherpas, thank God, they were awesome. They were literally feeding me my protein bars because I was so weak. It was absolutely, it was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life, by far, hands down.
Wait, hang on. How much harder is Everest then?
So the difference I find with Everest is most of Kilimanjaro was manageable, except the last night, right? Summit night. So the last 36 hours. That was absolute hell. The difference with Everest is every day was difficult. It was manageable, but every day was very difficult. So I think overall, Everest was harder than Kilimanjaro. But everyone has their own opinion. But the views with Everest were absolutely stunning. But again, very mentally tough, physically tough. But it's worth it. It's worth it. So I'm a big believer in pushing yourself, making yourself uncomfortable. I think those things build resilience when things go bad, like they are now with many real estate investors. And I think it just makes you a better person, father, husband, wife, because it builds resilience. If you purposely put yourself in uncomfortable situations, you're going to build that experience on how to deal with uncomfortable situations, right? So when they actually occur, involuntary, you have that experience and you don't bury your head in the sand. So to me, it's done wonders for me, I think, over the past couple of years. I know it sounds crazy, and I'm not people are like, oh, you're a hiker. I'm like, no, I'm not a hiker. I mean, I like it, but I'm not a hiker. I just do it to push myself. And you meet amazing people, which has been pretty awesome.
Did you get sick? Wait, how do you prepare yourself for altitude?
So when I was climbing Killy, I went to a gym downtown Toronto called Altitude, and they can simulate the loss of oxygen.
Oh,
so you wear
okay,
a mask, and so you can simulate different elevations. So I did that to train, and then for Everest, it was just regular training. You know, strength training, cardio, hiking up mountains, ski hills in Toronto. They have a couple ski hills in Toronto, and so I'd walk up and down the hills.
How many months was prep for Everest?
So Everest, I prepped for 4 months. I started January, and
It's
I
pretty serious, man.
Yeah, so 4 months, and yeah, so it's it's a lot of training. You have to walk. You should walk at least 3 or 4 hours, a couple times a week, just so your body gets used to walking that long. Because generally, you're walking 6 to 8 hours a day uphill. Sometimes just steps, which I wasn't expecting. So you could walk 3 hours up a hill, just step after step after step, in 35 degrees weather. So it's brutal.
Sorry, 35 Fahrenheit or Celsius?
30 Celsius.
It was hot.
Yeah, hot. So the first couple days, it's very hot.
Oh.
Yeah. First couple days, it's very hot because you're at sea level, right?
Okay.
And
then
once you start ascending, it gets colder and colder and colder and colder, right? So like where that picture was taken, that was at base camp. And so there's glaciers off to the side. You can see glaciers and just absolutely incredible.
For the listeners' benefit, we're looking at Brian's Instagram, acquiring_wisdom. Base camp, 5,000, almost 5,400 meter elevation.
Yeah, so it's probably about 17,000 feet above sea level.
What's the equivalent in Canada? That's
Canada, we're probably at sea level, so maybe like.
Would Banff be close to that elevation?
No, not even close.
Not even close. Okay.
Nothing.
Nothing
in North America.
Nothing in North America.
No. Okay. Nothing in North America. South America has a couple mountains that are huge, Aconcagua, but nothing close to this.
Would you recommend this experience?
Absolutely.
Would you do it again?
So here's what I tell people: you don't need to climb a mountain. Most people won't, and that's fine. But just find things that are going to push you and make you uncomfortable. So if you're afraid of heights, maybe do the CN Tower walk outside. I think you did that, right? Did you do that?
Done 3 times. Doing it again this summer.
Yeah. So do that, right? It's going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to push you.
Yeah.
Do whatever is that is going to make you uncomfortable. That's going to push you.
Because there's lots of local options.
There are a lot of local options. But one of the cool things is, again, we were talking about, I'm a relationship person.
Yeah.
And you meet people from all over the world.
Yeah.
Right? And which we all stay in contact. We have a WhatsApp group. So a lot of the people that I climbed with Kilimanjaro are the same people that I climbed Everest with. Right? And we're
it's an experience to travel.
Yeah.
You're all bonded for life.
Exactly. And we stay in contact. We message each other all the time. So it's very cool. And we're planning our next trip. We'll see where that takes us, but it's awesome.
Atlanta, Georgia. There's mountains to climb there.
But yeah, I'm just a big believer in pushing yourself.
Amazing. All right, we're running out of time, Brian. I always like to give some open air to my guests. Anything we haven't covered or you want to share?
Not really. Just take action in life. Be intentional about life, regardless of what it is. If you want to build wealth, take action. If you want to become a better father, be intentional. I book date nights with my daughter. I book, date nights with my son. Just be intentional. Put it in your calendar. And just be intentional about life, whatever that is for you. Whatever is important to you, be intentional.
Amazing. Instagram, acquiring_wisdom. Search. I'll have the George Brown link in the show notes. But what can they search? George Brown.
They can search George Brown College Real Estate Investment Strategies course.
Right. Amazing.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about getting into real estate, this is a great first option.
Right.
Ridiculously affordable. Feel free to message me if you want some more details, or you just want to bounce some ideas off me and learn more about the course.
Maybe some people should even just sign up their adult children for it.
Yeah, actually, I was meeting. Who did I meet with a couple weeks ago? And they're actually one of my coworkers, and she's gonna do that. Pay for her adult son to do it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Any U.S. component to this course?
So I do have a U.S. I had a U.S. speaker last time, someone who invests in the U.S. because this is what people want, right? It wasn't my intention, but people are inquiring about investing in the U.S. because unfortunately they're afraid to invest in Canada. It's kind of sad, actually.
Yeah. If you need Carmen, Dimitri, or Andrew, I'm sure we can set that up.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my next class, like I said, starts September, so we'll have you guys on.
Amazing. Happy to assist.
Awesome.
Because I feel like I feel every day I'm doing a public service by sparing Ontario landlords. Because hard assets, we still need it.
Still need hard assets, absolutely.
More than ever.
Yeah.
If like you mentioned, like if the U.S. dollar fails in 30 years, that meant the U.S. Canadian dollar had already failed somewhere along the way.
Exactly. Well, that's how I look at it, right? The Canadian dollar will fail way before the U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
Way before. So we need diversification outside of Canada.
Yeah.
Even if the Canadian economy was doing well relative to its peers, we still need diversification outside of Canada.
Yeah. Hard assets.
Yeah.
Take your pick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You and I have our favorites.
Absolutely.
Obviously.
Yeah.
All right. Brian, thanks again for doing this.
No, glad to be here, and hopefully people saw some value in it.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to invest in real estate from scratch, my team teaches beginners how to use the #1 investment strategy that I personally use in a virtual free training class every month. Go to investortraining.ca/YouTube to register for our next class. The link's also in the description as well. I publish at least 2 to 3 videos a week here, so subscribe if you want to keep learning from seasoned investors like myself and my guests. And if you're just starting out, feel free to ask questions and comment below, and I do the best to answer each of those comments and questions myself. Again, if you're ready to learn the nitty-gritty about real estate investing from a professional investor, register for our next virtual class. That's at investortraining.ca/YouTube. Thanks again for watching. See you in the next video.